Have you ever wondered why society feels threatened by the person who stands completely alone? Welcome to Winds of Thought. Today we explore a profound truth about personal power. The world often grows uneasy around individuals who require no external validation, not because they pose any threat, but because their self-sufficiency makes them uncontrollable. Our culture celebrates dependency, people who seek constant approval, follow popular trends, and cannot function without collective support. But the individual who builds their own foundation, governs their own actions, and works quietly without begging for recognition becomes something extraordinary. That person evolves into someone beyond manipulation or control. Others observe them with curiosity, sometimes even apprehension, because when someone becomes entirely self-contained, they become truly unstoppable. Today, I want to demonstrate why cultivating emotional resilience, mental fortitude, and internal power represents life's most significant transformation. Not to isolate yourself from humanity, but to become someone who is powerful, not isolated. The system trains you for dependency. From earliest education, you're conditioned to rely on external structures. You learn to request authorization, await endorsement, and adhere to conventions even when they restrict your potential. You're molded to conform, to mirror collective behavior, and to avoid noticeable differentiation. But the instant you begin exercising independent thought, the entire dynamic shifts. When you cease seeking validation and start trusting your own discernment, the establishment becomes unsettled. People claim you've transformed. They say you've become remote. They label you self-centered for prioritizing your development. But the reality is both simple and profound. You're finally awakening consciousness. You're selecting serenity over commotion, evolution over convenience, and self-control over diversion. And when you no longer require perpetual reinforcement from others, you begin perceiving existence with renewed lucidity. You observe that most people remain confined within psychological barriers constructed from apprehension, uncertainty, and emotional reliance. You comprehend that authentic liberation commences when you learn to stand independently. You recognize that the most resilient, most potent iteration of yourself awaits behind the gateway of self-reflection, ready to emerge when you cease fearing your own companionship. This marks the commencement of becoming formidable, not because you cause harm, but because you transcend limitations. The self-reliant individual isn't emotionless, they're self-constructed. When people encounter the concept of complete self-sufficiency, they frequently envision someone detached, aloof, or unfeeling. They imagine someone who has sealed their emotions, avoided intimacy, or rejected social connection. But that perception is fundamentally incorrect. An autonomous person isn't without compassion. They simply grasp a reality that most people never fully internalize. Excessive dependence on others creates vulnerability. When your contentment derives from external sources, it can disappear instantly when those sources withdraw. When your assurance depends on endorsement, it fractures at the initial indication of disapproval. And when your strength relies on outside reinforcement, you forfeit it immediately when that support vanishes. The self-determined individual chooses an alternative route. They build everything internally: their tranquility, their resilience, their bravery, and their identity. They invest in personal development because they understand that genuine freedom means maintaining stability regardless of who departs, criticizes, or betrays them. They stop dreading rejection because their value originates within, not from external assessments. They stop fearing solitude because they've become their own ally. They stop fearing deprivation because their power springs from what they've created, not what they've borrowed. This level of self-command is uncommon, and rarity possesses inherent value. Society honors such individuals because they cannot be destabilized, influenced, or dominated. They aren't heartless. They're fulfilled, integrated, and potent. They're formidable in the truest interpretation, not because they injure others, but because they've mastered themselves and stand immovable in a world constructed on interdependence. The external world can strip you of everything except what you build internally. Existence can transform abruptly. Relationships can dissolve. Companions can become unfamiliar. Careers may terminate. Strategies may collapse. And situations may disintegrate. Financial resources can vanish instantly. Reputation can be demolished momentarily. But the internal resilience you develop, the self-discipline, the mentality, the courage, the perseverance, no one can ever remove that from you. That's why the most robust individual consistently invests in personal growth. They learn daily to sharpen their intellect. They train their physique to maintain discipline and adaptability. They shape their character through principles that withstand pressure. Everything they become is achieved, not bestowed. Everything they accomplish stems from personal effort and sacrifice. And because they built themselves independently, they know they can reconstruct themselves repeatedly, regardless of how frequently life challenges them. Most people crumble under pressure because their strength was borrowed, not built. But a self-made person rises continuously because their foundation resides within. They don't need applause or recognition to feel significant. They don't need collective support for elevation. They're quiet warriors, trained through adversity, refined through introspection, and strengthened through self-mastery. That's what makes them authentically formidable. When you stop needing people, you begin attracting superior people. It appears paradoxical, but proves accurate. The moment you cease pursuing others, they start acknowledging you. When you stop seeking endorsement, people start respecting your presence. And when you stop attempting to impress others, you naturally become more impressive. Why does this phenomenon occur? Because genuine confidence possesses magnetic attraction. A person who understands their worth without requiring external validation becomes influential. Strength attracts people. Discipline commands respect. Independence inspires confidence. People admire someone who stands firmly on personal foundation, someone who doesn't fracture under stress or alter their essence merely to assimilate with the majority. When you achieve psychological independence, your relationships enhance, not because you desperately require companionship, but because you can finally choose individuals who genuinely contribute value to your life. You stop accepting disrespect. You stop permitting emotional exploitation. You stop tolerating people who deplete your vitality. Instead, you attract those who are authentic, resilient, and sincere. And when you prioritize personal development, you establish new standards. People begin treating you with increased respect because they perceive you're no longer dependent, no longer desperate, and no longer controlled by the terror of isolation. The shadow aspect of social dependency requires honest examination. Most contemporary individuals cannot function without validation. They depend on external approval to feel significant, worthy, or even animated. They require social media engagement to feel visible, commentary to feel valued, and constant attention to feel important. Their self-perception remains fragile because it's constructed on others' opinions rather than personal foundation. They hunger for praise, endorsement, and acknowledgement, and they refresh digital devices incessantly, hoping for minor attention doses that temporarily fill internal emptiness. Many constantly seek guidance from others because they distrust their own judgment. They dread silence because quiet moments force confrontation with insecurities and limitations, something they desperately attempt to avoid. This creates dependency cycles that control their behaviors, emotions, and even